Now Naaman, the captain of the army of the kings of Aram, was a great man with his master, highly respected, because by him the Lord had given him victory to Aram. The man was also a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. Now the Arameans had gone out in bands and had taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "I have a prophet who is in Samaria. There he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went in and told his master, saying, "Israel." Then the king of Aram said, "Go, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." He departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, "And now as the letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man is sending word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? But consider now how you seek in a quarrel against me. It happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent word to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Now let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent his messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean." But Naaman was furious and went away and said, "Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leprosy. Are not the Bana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. Then his servants came near and spoke to him, saying, "My father, had the prophet told you to do something great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean?" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. We'll pause there. That's the first part of our story. I want to begin by telling you that godliness lifts you higher. A lot of people think that godliness is somehow going to take something away from you. That if you become a Christian, life is not going to be fun. Now, I understand that those of us who have some experience in life understand the absolute absurdity of that idea. This is the lie that Satan likes to tell to young people more often than not, because young people lack experience and they can't see that far down the road. Those of us who've made it further down the road and have watched people live a life of sin and indulgence and selfishness and see where it ends up, go, "I'm glad I didn't take that road." But that is the sales pitch Satan has. If you become a conservative Christian, your life is just going to be so empty and it's not going to be any fun and you're never going to enjoy anything. We have a contrast in this same kind of thinking between Naaman and Gehazi. And we're going to break them down. We're going to contrast their heart and see how godliness lifted one and a lack of godliness brought another one down. So Naaman basically is a worldly man who discovered God and the joys that God can bring. And Gehazi was a religious man to a point who lost his blessings because his heart really belonged to the world. And Satan deceived him. Satan has deceived many. And our goal is for Satan not to deceive us. That's the primary goal. Now, if we can get that message out further, that's great, but that's the first goal. So we have Naaman. He's a mighty man. He enjoyed a lot of success. He was the upper echelon of his society, and he finds himself quite limited because he has leprosy and there's nothing he can do about it. And I do need to make a point here, because as you look at Naaman and you think, wow, this guy was at the top of the ladder, and he was, of his day. You and I are so far ahead of Naaman, he can't even imagine the life we live. So we're going to talk about Naaman, and we're going to use the success he enjoyed of that day. But don't you dare look at him and think, oh, he had it better than I do. The food you eat excels anything he ever had. He never said to the servant girl, hey, go set the AC on 70. It's a little warm in here. He never said to a servant, what's wrong with the Wi-Fi? Why is it not working? He never said to his servant, hey, get me a dental appointment. I need to go get this tooth fixed. You understand, please. We are so far ahead of him. The only thing we don't have, and I don't know if you'd really want this, the only thing that we don't have that he had is some political power. And if you want to live in the middle of Washington, that's your business. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to say that ain't a whole lot of anything anymore, is it? So here's a guy who's at the top level of the success of his ancient day, and he finds himself in a situation he can't do anything with. Now, he's got money, he's got power, he's got a lot of influence, and yet he runs into this dead end. And then the help comes from a totally unexpected place, and that's why you got to keep your eyes open all the time, because you never know where it's going to come in. You don't know who's going to give you that piece of the puzzle or point that piece of the puzzle out to you that makes a tremendous difference. In this case, it was a little slave girl that they had captured. And she had enough sympathy to say, I know somebody who can heal him. So Naaman, he needed help, and this is help that could not be bought. And the help you and I need is help that cannot be bought. And it cannot be manipulated, and it cannot be staged outside of the surrender to God's will that we're getting ready to talk about. There's no way to manipulate this. If you're going to get God's blessing, there's one way, and that's his way. So you got God's way, or you got no way. And that's where the flesh comes in and gives us a hard time. So Naaman had to be humbled, and he had to learn to do it God's way. He had to go, look, I don't understand this. I can't, he had to be talked into it, which we'll get to that just a little bit. But he had to let go of that pride that was weighing him down. And that is the thing that stops everybody. It is pride. Just pure, simple pride. Well, I'm smarter than that. They can't tell me what to do. The younger generation says what? Those bunch of old fogies, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't even know what life's about anymore. And it's pride. What does the older generation do? The older generation does their own version of it. Well, I'm 50, 60, 70 years old. I got a lifetime of experience. Them little kids, little 25, 30-year-olds, they're still wet behind the ears. They ain't even got it figured out yet. That's pride again. Pride will sneak in a dozen different ways. Satan's just looking for that little chink in the armor where he can plant a little seed of pride, whatever it happens to be that will trigger your pride. That's all he needs. Because once he triggers your pride, then he's got a handle. He's got a little hook in. He's got a little bit of hold. And if he can set that hook, you're in a whole lot of trouble. So God's help comes along, and sometimes it looks way, way too simple. We have some expectations. We're human, right? And so in our humanness, we kind of look ahead. And we look at things and go, well, I think it's going to go this way or it's going to go that way. And we have expectations. I don't think that you having an expectation and looking ahead and anticipating is wrong in and of itself. I don't know how not to do it. It's kind of hard not to anticipate what's getting ready to happen. In fact, a lot of people in the mental field would tell you that's just what the brain does automatically. They would tell you that is how we have survived this long, at least your particular lineage. If you had somebody way back in your history that didn't know how to always anticipate what was coming, you wouldn't be here. Because the lion would have ate them and your lineage would have been gone. So you come from a long, long line of people who knew how to anticipate and look out for things and plan ahead. That's quite well. I think that's a great thing. But we have to get past ourselves. Because as Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 says, I think we can just quote this one close enough. God's ways aren't our ways. His thoughts aren't our thoughts. He does things different. So Naaman had this expectation, and it makes sense. He was a man of power. He was a man of rank. He was up there in the world of his day. So he's thinking, man, I'm coming because I'm somebody. And since I'm somebody, this is going to really be an event. He gets to the gate, Elisha's place, and Elisha sends a servant out to him. Come on, are you kidding? And says, go dip in this river 7 times and you'll be taken care of. And he can't wrap his head around that simplicity. So we have the same problem. I called it selective obedience here. Let's go over to 1 Corinthians 1:27. This is the challenge that is common, especially if Satan can stir up a little pride. 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong. And the base things of the world and the despised, God has chosen the things that are not, so that he may nullify the things that are, so that no man may boast before God. But by his doing, you are Christ in Christ Jesus, who became wisdom from God in righteousness and sanctification and redemption, just as it is written, let him who boast in the Lord. Not our plan, not our idea, not our fancy expectations and all of the things that we anticipated would happen, but to humble ourselves and go, okay, if we want to conform to the plan of God, then we must, this is so obviously simple, conform to the plan of God. If Naaman wanted to conform to the plan of God, he had one choice. Go dip 7 times in the River Jordan. That was his only option. There wasn't another option. It wasn't go to another river. It wasn't dip a different number of times. It was that. As simple and plain as it was. That's when God begins to lift us up. When we do truly surrender our heart to his will, whether it makes sense to us or not, whether it's pleasing to us or not, whether it gratifies our flesh or not, it is God's plan, God's recipe. Let me say it this way. If you had a grandma that made that one special recipe, let's just say chocolate chip cookies, and you want to enjoy those chocolate chip cookies again today, you do what? You follow grandma's recipe. Pretty simple, isn't it? Now, if you change the recipe, you may get a good chocolate chip cookie. I'm not going to argue that with you. I haven't found many of those I don't like. But the fact still remains that you don't get the ones grandma made unless you follow grandma's recipe. That's the only way to do it. And the only way to be lifted up by God is to look at his simple plan and the things he did and go, okay, this is the way we're going to do it. And this is one of the things that confuses people about the restoration movement, is because it just looks too simple. And maybe y'all are just going to follow the Bible, that's it? You're not going to do anything else? No, not as a church, we're not. We're going to do what the Bible says, and we're going to limit ourselves to it. And some people are passing up the very blessings they desire because they desire something more grandiose. Is there a more grandiose way to do church than the way we do church? Absolutely. It is, there's 100 different ways to do it. Now, if we had the talent, we could have the stage and the band and the lights and the fog machines and the screens running all the time in the background and, be careful how I say this. The people dancing in the spirit and the flag wavers. We could dim the lights in the auditorium and we could make a much more fleshly appealing service. Absolutely. In fact, there are programs that teach churches how to do that so they can become mega churches. It's there. The Restoration movement says, no, we want to get as close to God as we can, and to get as close to God as you can, you follow God's recipe. You do what God wants. You do what he desires, trusting that he will be, his will was done. And so his plans, they do look simple. Absolutely they look simple. But that's singing, right? And certainly a whole orchestra would change the whole feel of that. I wouldn't argue that from a fleshly point of view. But what is God's goal in singing? He wants the melody that you make in your heart. He wants the fruit of your lips. That's all he wants. And when we give him what he wants, he's pleased. And when he's pleased, he blesses. And when we do it as he wants, and it just all comes together. We get closer and closer to God. Now, can we do something that would appeal to the flesh more? Absolutely. We could go to different rivers, so to speak. But God wants a heart that's just willing to yield to his will. And that's the idea behind the restoration movement. So we're going to trust in God. And we trust that if we do it the way he said to do it, even though it doesn't always make sense to our expectations and what we anticipated, just like Naaman. Naaman anticipated something big and fancy, a little bit of fanfare and what have you. What he got was something very humiliating and humbling. And he walked away with what? A blessing that we can't hardly even describe. Leprosy healed. If we want the leprosy of sin healed, and we want to draw closer to God, we just do what God said. So things may look simple. That's okay. Is it what God said? Was it God's recipe, so to speak? So humility, like Naaman's, unlocks God's favor. His pride almost cost him his blessing, though. Wouldn't you like to kind of been in on that conversation? I mean, he's all powerful. He can say, about anything he wants, and it's going to get done. And he's leaving in anger and wrath. How would you like to have been that first servant that said, "Excuse me, master"? I would have stepped back. I wouldn't have walked right up next to him within striking distance and said, "Hey, had he told you to do something great, you'd have done it." I'd have been way back over here, maybe as far as furthest away from him, and go, "Hey, if he had told you to do something, you'd still been dead if he wanted you dead, though, right?" But it almost cost him. The healing that transformed his entire life because it didn't fit what he expected. The flesh likes those grandiose things. The flesh likes that which is flashy and wowy and oohing, and people look at that, and the flesh likes to dive into it. And God goes, "No, that's really not where I'm going with this one." He says, I want you to learn to crucify the flesh with its passion and desires. So humility is what pleases God. If you look at 1 Peter 5:6, really, let's go to 1 Peter 5:5. We're just a short passage there, but God makes it quite clear. And God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time. Now, that just hints at another little bit of a thing. He will exalt us at the proper time. Well, I have to be honest with you. My flesh says I want to be exalted now. I want to be exalted. You got 6 days to do it. I want to be exalted. I'll give you a year. Boy, that'd be really patient, wouldn't it? God says, no, that's your exaltation is not this side of the tombstone. Our exaltation is beyond this life. When he says, after the race is over and the pilgrimage is done, well done, thou good and faithful servant. So our Bible message often sounds backward to worldly-minded people. They don't understand why we do things the odd way we do. Incidentally, if we are going to be on the straight and narrow road, and few there be who find it, and most people choose the broad road, what should most people be thinking about us as they look from the broad road and look at our narrow road practice? Should they be in agreement? I mean, it would be nice if they were in agreement, but the worldly is over on the broad road because it operates the way they think it should operate. And they look over at the conservative, biblical-based restoration movement practice and go, well, that's crazy. That's all messed up. Why would you want to do it that way? And they think we're weird. And when worldly people think you're weird, your reply, at least in your mind to yourself, ought to be thank you. He did redeem us to be his own peculiar people. So the restoration idea, I know it sounds backwards to a lot of folks, and it's something, the oddities of it you have to get over, but it's kind of like Naaman. He had to get over the oddity of what? Dip in the Jordan 7 times? How in the world is that going to do anything? And it did everything God wanted to accomplish. There's your trick. There's your hack. There's your inside secret. The goal of successful Christianity is not to accomplish the agenda I have in mind for Christianity. The goal of a faithful Christian is to accomplish God's agenda in God's way. Now, once we can make that sacrifice and let go of pride and let go of looking at the Abana and the Pharpar rivers and all those other places and go, hey, God said it, that settles it. I'm good with it. Now we have stepped onto a path that leads to blessing. So our humility has to be a lifestyle, because it's not just Naaman and the river, right? It's the whole spectrum of everything. And I don't have time to run through it, but I'll give you a real short, quick list if I can, maybe 3 points. He says in Ephesians 5:22 through 33, tells husbands and wives how to treat one another. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the world. Forget the world. I don't care what the world thinks. He said to the husband, honor your wife as Christ the church. Love her as Christ loves the church. Okay, Lord, you said it. That's the path I want to be on. Can you be at peace with that? He says, study to show yourself approved to God, a workman need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, right? Okay, he put the responsibility on the individual Christians to understand the book. We live in a time where we think everybody's a specialist. We have a doctor, we have a dentist, we have the eye doctor, we have a car mechanic, we have everybody that does their specialty, and the specialty they chose is their business, but it's the preacher's specialty to know the book. Yeah, it is your preacher's responsibility to know the book, but it's also your responsibility to know the book. And that's where we come into humility as a lifestyle. Well, I don't have time to read the Bible. Okay, then you chose the Abana or the Pharpar. But you did not choose the Jordan, because God gave everybody 24 hours in the day. And as I like to say, and hadn't said in a while, but everybody has time for what they truly want time for. So you look at this and you go, okay, what feels beneath me? What feels too simple, too ordinary? What feels too awkward? What doesn't make sense to me? If you can find that place that rubs you the wrong way, I'm going to suggest to you, you may have found that place where Satan's going to try to plant the pride. You may have found that place where he's going to try to get you off track, and where your next step to higher spirituality is actually at. It's on the other side of that irritation, that frustration. Now, I got to keep going. There's more I want to say there. So true godliness, it doesn't lead you lower. If you can do what God said to do, the way God said to do it, spiritually, it's always going to lead to the blessings God said he'd give you. So he left there transformed, more than his flesh was healed. He wanted to pay Elisha, but Elisha's, no, this was a gift from God. I don't take your money. He asked for 2 mule loads of dirt, and that's always an odd one to us. But in the ancient day, their ideology was that God was closely related to the very land itself. And in his mind, taking the dirt back to his homeland was like taking a piece of God with him. Now, I know that sounds weird to us, but in his mind, that's the way it worked. So Naaman left transformed, joyful, and had a story to tell for however much longer he lived. What I want you to notice is that God can't be purchased. He can only be surrendered to. And again, I'm going to say it. Look for that place where you're resisting surrender. Wherever that place is, that's likely your next step to higher ground. And when you get past that step, you're going to find another one, you're going to find another one, because that's the way that works. So live with gratitude for the opportunity to surrender. Be glad about it. Now, I'm running out of time, so we won't read the second part of that text, but we will run through it. Now we're going to look at Gehazi and what he did. So he had a front row seat to everything that had been going on. He had seen things that you and I can't imagine. Elisha had a pretty phenomenal life there. And so he started calculating. He saw those riches heading back to the other country, and he's like, whoa, wait a minute. And he let a little greed get into his heart. Now, this is neat because he was part of the inner circle. He was part of the inside group. He knew that kind of stuff, but he didn't have the contentment of heart to have a relationship with God. In fact, I would question if he really, really had a relationship with God, because Paul would tell us there in 1 Timothy 6:8 to be content with what you have. You have food and clothing, be content. In just a moment, we'll put 1 Timothy 6:10 there where he says, those who desire to be rich pierce themselves through. And man, does Gehazi ever illustrate that. So what we learn is we really, really, really have to guard our heart. Just because we show up and walk in religious circles and talk with religious people doesn't necessarily prove that our heart is really, really, really right with God. Devoted, loyal, dedicated, completely surrendered to Him. You can be involved in a religious community and have God as second or third place. Now, it's going to be hard for other people to see, but God will see it. True godliness is trying to become more and more like Christ. That would be our terminology anyway. So the greatest gain is not what we have, but who we follow. Are we really, really following Christ? Or are we looking down the road that says, woo, there's more money over that way, let me go that way? Well, I know it's not exactly right, but that's what Gehazi did, and it got himself in trouble. Our last one, compromise. It's bad. I don't know how long Gehazi thought he was going to be happy. I'm sure he had a few moments of happiness till Elisha talked to him. He rationalized his way into trouble. I should have put Jeremiah 17:9 up here where he says the heart is desperately wicked. This is one of the scary things. We can talk ourselves into believing anything we want to believe. We can drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. It's difficult to go back to Scripture and recalibrate. But that's what we do. That's part of the straight and narrow. So compromise always makes fleshly sense. Absolutely makes fleshly sense. That's why we do it. And then after we get ourselves in trouble, one of the first things we say is, well, all I was trying to do was... And then we offer a nice little excuse for what we were trying to do. And the sincerity may have been there. I wouldn't argue that. It's a little hard to argue someone's sincerity. But the fact of the matter is, if it wasn't God's plan, it wasn't God's plan. It was mine. And my own agenda will get me in trouble. Now, we quote Jeremiah 10:23 all the time. Not a man who walks direct his own steps. So godliness is a way of life. Now, it can be very costly, but it will never leave you empty if a close relationship with God is what you want. Now, if your religious experience is leaving you empty, then you've got to ask, what am I really going for? What am I really looking to get out of religion? Because God said, draw near to me and I will draw near to you. God said, I'll give you the peace that passes understanding. So if a religious experience is going, that's okay, then something's wrong. Because when we seek God, He will be found. Christ said not. It'll be open. Ask and you'll receive. So it will not leave you empty. Shallow godliness like Gehazi's, yeah, that'll leave you empty. That'll leave you going, yeah, I don't really get that. God doesn't bless the pretenders. He blesses those who take up their cross and follow Him with all their heart. Matthew 22:37, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. True godliness, it won't drag you down. Just won't do it. It can't. So last slide. What we have between these two guys is we have two stories. You and I, we haven't ended our story yet. We're one or the other. We're Naaman. We're ready to lay down our own ideas and our own think so and our own anticipations, expectations. Say, God, your way. I'm just going to surrender and trust you. Or we're going to be like Gehazi, and we're going to go through the motions, but not really fully in love with God. Well, we got some secondary things there that are really more important. Godliness, though, true godliness, is literally going to change how we live and how we think. Romans 12:2, going to transform our thinking by the renewing of our mind. So I'm going to ask you, don't settle for looking godly. That's a cheap game. Gehazi played it for a long time. I want you to be godly. In that deepest, most secret place of your heart that nobody but you and God can look, I want you to be godly there and pursue it with honesty and humility and a heart that's willing to be totally shaped by God, no matter what that shape turns out looking like, trusting that if this is the shape God wanted, that's the shape I want. There is no better shape for my life than His shape for my life. And you get on that 100%, the devil will never be able to trip you up like he did Gehazi. So let me ask, are you letting God shape your life? If you are, you stay the course. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. If you're not, it's time for a change. While together, you stand and sing.